Hello and welcome to this edition of Defacto Review, a weekly roundup of the biggest stories shaping Mongolia. Here with us tonight is our guest commentator, Mogi Bontoy. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
And I am Milena Mendes. We are live on Facebook at V Television, and we love to hear what you're thinking. So please send us your thoughts on Twitter using hashtag #Jargal_Defacto. Coming up on the show tonight. 17 mountaineers found dead after an accident at Mount Otgontengir. Mongolia issues $800 million gilt bond to refinance debt. Parliament amends budget for 300,000 Tobruk bonuses to civil servants. An energy company has become the first to list on Mongolia's new Mongolian Securities Exchange. We start tonight with a very sad news that happened this week. Mongolia's National Emergency Management Agency said on Monday that 17 bodies of the mountaineers who were climbing Mount Otgontengir were dead. Hoshua reported at a press conference. Brigadier General and First Deputy Head of the National Emergency Management Agency, Ge Adyunbuyan, said these bodies were found at an altitude of about 3,450 meters, saying that these mountaineers may have fallen from the cliff. The 17 Mongolians, being 7 women, were among a group of 27 climbers who successfully stood on Mount Otgontengir, but they ran into a snow avalanche when they were descending. More than 100 people were conducting a search and rescue operation with the help of 2 helicopters and other equipment. Mugi, such a sad news to start this with, but
Right.
What do you think of Mongolia's response to this accident?
I think our emergency response team were very professional. I think they've been one of our few government agencies that are very professional and when it comes to their job. And this is not the first time we've seen them in action. During the summer, we had a lot of forest fires and steppe fires. It's obviously very sad development that I think as a country, as a whole, we are mourning the loss of these 17 climbers, but I think our emergency response team are very professional and diligent, and were able to find all 17 missing people I think it was enough short of a time.
Right. And do you think these climbers were taking the necessary precautions in order to avoid maybe this accident?
Right. Well, obviously. During this time of the year, some of the professional, more experienced climbers gave an interview saying that during this time of the year, there's a high risk of an avalanche, especially when it's when it's getting cold and the snow is melting during the day and freezing during the night, and it's high time for danger of avalanches. So I think our climbers. There were a lot of professional climbers who were guiding the 27 climbers, but one of the criticisms was that they had too many people on one rope, so if one falls, they might have dragged the others as well. And of course, even if you are maybe professional, it doesn't matter how professional you are, you have to take proper due diligence when it comes to these dangerous situations, and it's in any situation, whether it's Mount Everest or not, no matter how professional you are, these kind of things obviously can happen.
Exactly.
Right.
That's unfortunate, but let's move on to another news here. Mongolia issues 800 million bond, and it will use funds to refinance debt. And officials said they will use the 800 million raised on Thursday from a bond issued to refinance debts as the government bids to slash an onerous budget deficit and get its struggling economy back on track, Reuters reported. Thursday's issue was 6.88 times oversubscribed, with final orders reaching $5.5 billion. The funds will be used to refinance another US dollar-denominated bond maturing in January and 1 billion yuan, approximately $150 million, some notes with a 7.5% coupon, due in June 2018 next year. The refinancing leaves the country without any major foreign debt deadlines until 2021. So what does this debt refinancing mean for the health of Mongolia?
Obviously, in the short term, it's a good news. We knew we had to refinance the upcoming Chinggis bonds, 500 millions, and also the dim sum bonds. The government doesn't have the money to pay it back, so it was obvious that Mongolia would have had to refinance it. So it's welcoming news that we were able to raise more than we needed. The original guidance was $650 million, with a higher coupon rate that was actual. Around 6.1% was the original guidance. So these Gerege bonds, the yield coupons are much lower, around 5.6%. And because it was heavily oversubscribed, I think government of Mongolia decided to use the opportunity to raise maximum amount of money that they could, and also lower the yield. So it's welcoming news. But the overall picture is that we are only delaying our debts payments along to the next government. So it's been a feature of us since we first issued our first international bonds. That was in 2012. That was the previous government in parliament. So we had to refinance that in this year, and now we're refinancing a previous government's issuance. And then the next government will have to pay the bonds that the previous government issued. So at a higher rate than we originally issued them. So we're only delaying our problems to the next government.
Yeah. And can you please give our viewers a little bit of details about the closing of the bond?
Sure. Well, the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank, the Bank of Mongolia, they've been on a roadshow for the past 2 weeks. London, New York, Boston, Singapore, and Hong Kong. They hired 3 big banks, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, and JP Morgan. These investment banks are not unfamiliar to Mongolia. They've all worked most of our previous issuances, so they're not strangers to Mongolia. It's welcoming in the short term. It just tells you that investors are chasing high yields wherever they can find it, and it doesn't matter if Mongolian credit rating is rated junk. It's still unsure if the U.S. Federal Reserve will, when they say they will raise their policy rates, but they still haven't figured out when they're going to raise it. So during this uncertain times, I think investors are looking for higher yields, and obviously when the Federal Reserve raises their rates, it won't be good for Mongolia. So I think we use the right window of opportunity to delay our problems till 21.
Right. Well, coming this good news, what is actually the current situation, the current debt situation of Mongolia?
Well, our budget deficit and our debt is at a record high. This year's budget, we were able to lower it within the IMF Extended Fund Facility program. Our government is obligated now to cut our budget deficit, decrease our foreign total debt. So within that scope, this year's budget has been a little conservative, and we are currently discussing next year's budget in Parliament right now. The new finance minister said that they will slash budget deficit by 300 billion tughers next year, but that still makes our budget deficit too high, still too high, but that's way within the IMF requirements.
Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to our next topic tonight. The government has announced a one-time salary bonus for civil servants in an attempt to ease rising tensions as teachers, doctors, and other government employees protest for pay raises. We've been talking about the protests for so long now here in the show.
Right.
The government will be providing a one-time grant of 300,000 Mongolian tugruk to 192,000 government employees, said the new finance minister Che Hurulbatar, the UB Post reported. Hurulbatar said the payments would cost a total 55 billion Mongolian tugruk. Again, we have been talking about these protests and strikes for so long now on the show. So is this a sum Mongolia can actually afford right now?
Sure, we can afford it, but still, I wouldn't. It's not economically. It's not the best way to spend our money. You know, we previously talked about the budget deficit, right? So it would be prudent. It would have been prudent to spend all of the more revenues than we projected this year. We were around 500 billion tugriks was revenue was government got more than they projected, and there was a lot of debate about how the government should spend it. But obviously, the right thing would have been to use it to decrease the budget deficit. But of course, during when teachers are striking and nurses have joined the fight, and now even the government, other sectors, cultural employees of the government, artists that are employed by the government have joined the fight, and the teachers 1,000 teachers already announced that they will strike tomorrow without a deadline, meaning that they did not accept 300,000 tugriks as enough of a compensation. They wanted much more. They want their salaries to be raised, but the government's response is easy because they have an obligation under the IMF not to increase state employee salary until the end of 2018. So the government had no choice. They couldn't raise the salaries unless they broke the agreement or amended the IMF agreement. So this is kind of a way to circumvent that IMF deal and give a one-time kind of compensation to all state servants. But the criticism was, why not just give it to the ones who are actually protesting?
Right.
Why not just the doctors, the teachers, and some of the other ones who were striking? But my feeling is that they decided to give it to all state servants because they probably expected more state servants to join the strike, perhaps. If teachers are successful in their negotiations with government, maybe other sectors of the government might have said, maybe this is the right, why not join the strike as well, right, and got something out of it. So I think this is just a short-term remedy for a big, huge problem that will not go away because of this one-time compensation.
Yeah, and we're talking about a 5.5 billion Mongolian tugruk impact on the IMF and partners, right? How is it going to look like for them? Well,
I think the government is justifying it because this is not a salary increase. This is just one-time compensation. Obviously, this is, it's going to help, will be a short-term relief for some of the state servants, but the long-term effects of it will not be good for Mongolia. So I think the government thinks that they've gotten away with it and that it's not in breach of the IMF deal.
And you know what? Last weekend we were talking on the show about the raising of the poverty level in Mongolia. And we also mentioned that the teachers are not below the line or not even close to the poverty line. But what do you think about this constant protest for asking for a raise?
Well, they might not be poor under the World Bank classifications, but they are well below the average salary that Mongolians get. We mentioned in previous programs that the average salary is a little under 1 million tugriks a month. The average teacher salary is around 500 to 600 tugriks. So this is way below almost half of what the average salary is in Mongolia. So it is way below the average. But the thing is that the teachers' salaries, and even I think state servants in general, their salaries were not raised according to what our economic growth was. We had some double-digit growths in only a few years ago, but average state employee salary were not raised in projection of the economic growth. So they've been falling behind. They've been falling behind the average personal income that Mongolians have experienced. So I think for me personally, I can't put blame on the teachers for striking, for protesting. The government should have handled the issue way long ago. Managed to raise their salaries when we had the opportunity, and not come to this when we are in economic troubles.
Right. Well, we'll have to see how this story develops. And now, moving on to the last topic overnight, the government has announced, an energy company has become the first one, Mongolia's second ever stock exchange, the Mongolian Securities Exchange. The energy has listed about 78 million shares, or 34% equity, at a price of 1 tugruk per share on the exchange, which is being called the MSX for short. The energy company, which was established in 2011, has operations that produces materials for energy infrastructure and automation. It opened an LED factory for the company Ardent LED in 2014, only 3 years ago. And Energy says it will use the funds to finance an expansion of its operational capacities. So what are the advantages of having a second stock exchange?
Well, it's not a secret that Mongolian capital market has been lagging behind every other sector, especially from the other ones in the financial sector in general. Banks dominate the financial sector. They provide 90% of the financing for businesses, and capital market, the stock exchange, is only about 5%. So capital market has been lagging behind, and a lot of the blame was on the stock exchange itself and the financial regulator that oversees the market. Mongolian Stock Exchange, the first one, the government-owned, 100% government-owned, was created in 1992 to handle state privatizations, and it did not envisage or expect or plan ahead. They did not worry about the liquidity that should be needed in any kind of stock exchange to be able to right price for any stock. So I think the frustration came out of that. Private individuals who created the new stock exchange wanted a stock exchange that is liquid, that is more transparent, that is more managed better, and have a settlement system that meets international standards, which is called T+3.
Okay.
Meaning that you buy stock with a small percentage of what it costs, and then after 3 days you pay the actual money for it. So during the 3 days you can sell it, buy it anytime, how many times you want, but settlement happens at 3 days. So this is the international norm everywhere else. And the Mongolian Stock Exchange, we have to MSE and MSX. MSE, the first one, they bought a very expensive trading platform from the London Stock Exchange, and then it was supposed to become T+3, meeting international standards, and then be able to perhaps attract foreign listed stocks to be able to list in Mongolia, so that trading can happen simultaneously, because it'll have the same settlement system. But then because of misinformation or bad integration with other institutions, government-owned settlement center, government-owned clearing system, so these three things did not work together. So they reverted back to the prepaid system, where you have to put all the money in your bank account first and then be able to put in your order. So and that was the reason why we were removed from the watch list, from the FTSE Frontier Markets list. If you were successful it would have been, international funds who invest in indexes would have been able to buy into Mongolian stock exchange stocks, but then that did not happen. So I think the new stock exchange is trying to fix that, and because it's privately managed, it might be better. They might be able to better handle the settlement system, which is not being able to be done by the state-owned ones.
And Mogi, can we say that MSE is actually at risk of falling behind, or not really?
Well, not at the moment, because the new stock exchange only has one IPO that's happening right now. So, but it is giving a signal to the government. I think they need to be able to better manage these state-owned stock exchanges and the various institutions that are that surround the stock exchange, and especially at the financial regulator level. So at the moment, it's not going to threaten MSE. Well, there's nothing to be really threatened, because Mongolian Stock Exchange, MSE, does not handle that many trades either. It's 10, maybe 20 million turks a day trading, which is really ridiculous. And hopefully the new stock exchange will show it how it's supposed to be done.
Right. Well, we still have a few minutes left. Mogi, let me ask you, what is your favorite sport?
Football, soccer.
Soccer?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you like basketball?
Of course, as anyone would.
As every Mongolian. So last week we closed up our show talking about the International Federation Basketball Association bringing the 3-on-3 basketball tournament here in UB actually, and the Asia Cup finished this night with some very good news to Mongolians. We'd like to congratulate the Mongolian national team for beating the New Zealand team 19-14. Have you watched any of the 3-on-3 games before?
I watched the previous ones that were like exhibition games that were staged in Mongolia.
I had the opportunity to be there this weekend, and I have to congratulate the committee that is organizing all of this kind of events here. It's really important to show some support to Mongolian developing sports, and they are on the road for qualifying for for the Olympics in Tokyo 2020. So congratulations to Mongolia. Mogi, do you have any final words for us tonight?
Well, let me congratulate Mongolia for becoming winners in the Asia Cup. I think this gives them a good chance of qualifying for 2020, which is, I hear, the first time they were adding a category, the basketball 3-on-3. So there might be another category that Mongolia competes in the Olympics besides wrestling and judo. So that's welcome news, and it's a team sport.
Yeah.
We Mongolians have never been good in team sports, competitively. So this is excellent news.
Awesome. Thank you very much for staying with us tonight.
Of course, thank you.
And I'd like to thank you also to staying with us tonight and listening to this roundup of stories from Mongolia. And I hope you have a great week, Mongolia. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.